It is the night before the battle, and the field smells of mud. Not the clean mud of a riverbank, the thick, black, clinging mud of a field that was plowed 3 weeks ago and has been soaked by 2 days of cold October rain. It is the kind of mud that grabs your boot and does not let go. The kind that makes a sound when you pull your foot free. A wet, sucking sound, like the earth is trying to eat you. The English army has been standing in this field since before dawn. 6,000 men, or what is left of 6,000 men. They have been marching for 17 days through northern France without adequate food, bleeding from dysentery, their boots rotting off their feet. Some of the archers have no boots at all. They have marched 300 miles from the port of Harfleur to get here, to this plowed field outside a small French village called Azincourt, where the largest army France can assemble is waiting for them. On the other side of this field, somewhere between 12 and 36,000 French soldiers are waiting for the signal to advance. They are not afraid. They are impatient. They have been arguing all night about who gets the ransom rights to the English king. In a few hours, something is going to happen on this field that military scholars will still be studying 600 years later. The mud is going to do most of the killing. And what the English king does after he wins, after the battle is already decided, will shock a medieval world that was not easily shocked. You have heard of the Battle of Agincourt. You have not heard what actually happened in that field. You know Shakespeare's version, the stirring speech about a band of brothers, the outnumbered English army, the triumphant victory. What Shakespeare wrote is beautiful, almost none of it is true. And the part that is true, the part historians have argued about for 600 years, is more brutal and more morally complicated than any play could contain. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what happened on that field. Every charge, every volley, every death. And you will understand the order that the English king gave at the moment of his greatest victory. The order his admirers have been trying to explain away for 6 centuries. If you want the real stories behind history's most famous battles, the details that textbooks leave out, subscribe and turn on notifications. We go deep on this channel. Now let me take you back to France, October 1415, to the king who marched an army of sick and hungry men toward the largest cavalry force in Europe and bet everything on a field of mud. Henry V was 29 years old, not the roaring, silver-tongued hero of Shakespeare's play. The real Henry was quiet, precise, and deeply religious. He was the kind of man who tracked his military expenses to the penny and kept copies of all his correspondence. He had been fighting since he was 16, when he took an arrow through the face at the Battle of Shrewsbury, an arrow that penetrated the bone beside his nose and had to be removed afterward with a specially designed surgical instrument, in a procedure so dangerous that most physicians refused to attempt it. He survived the surgery. He recovered. He was back in the field within weeks. The scar on his face never fully healed. He became King of England in 1413, 2 years before Agincourt, inheriting a kingdom exhausted by internal conflict and short of money. But Henry had a claim to the French throne through his great-great-grandmother, a claim thin enough to be disputed but real enough to negotiate over. And Henry had decided to negotiate at the point of a sword. He invaded France in the summer of 1415 with around 10,000 men. He besieged Harfleur, a port town in Normandy, and took it. But the siege was ugly. Dysentery tore through the English camp. By the time Harfleur fell, a third of his army was too sick to continue. Henry should have sailed home. Every practical calculation said, sail home. He did not sail home. He announced he would march his surviving army overland from Harfleur to Calais, 600 kilometers across French territory, a deliberate provocation designed to force France to respond. The march took 17 days. The men who completed it arrived at Agincourt with rotting boots, empty stomachs, many still weakened by dysentery, facing a French army that had been assembling for weeks. Henry knew exactly what was waiting for him. He knew the odds. He made the march anyway. This is the first thing you need to understand about Agincourt. The English were not surprised by a larger enemy. They walked toward one on purpose. The French army waiting across that plowed field was the finest concentration of military aristocracy in Europe, The exact size has been debated for 6 centuries. French sources at the time claimed numbers so large they strained credibility. Modern historians working from muster rolls and logistics records put the force at somewhere between 12,000 and 20,000 armored soldiers, backed by thousands more infantry and archers. Even at the conservative estimate, the French outnumbered the English by at least 2 to 1, possibly 3 to 1. But numbers are not what made the French confident. What made them confident was armor. French knights in 1415 wore full plate armor, head to toe, custom fitted, the finest steel that medieval craftsmen could produce. A complete suit weighed between 20 and 30 kilograms. And underneath that plate, a knight would wear chainmail, thousands of interlocking iron rings adding another 10 kilograms. Roughly 40 kilograms of steel and iron worn as clothing. It covered every inch of the body. The visor protected the face. Gauntlets protected the hands. The joints were layered and articulated. A man in this armor, on horseback with a lance at his side, was one of the most lethal individual weapons that the medieval world had produced. And France had thousands of them. The night before the battle, in the French camp, the atmosphere was one of relaxed anticipation. Torches, music, gambling, arguments over protocol. Who would have the honor of capturing the English king? Henry was worth more alive than dead. What was the correct order of precedence for the nobility who would share the ransom? One chronicle tells us that French knights, so certain of victory, ordered their servants to prepare in advance the chains and restraints they planned to use when parading English prisoners through the streets of Paris. They had already written the ending. On the English side, there was no music. Walk into the English camp the night before the battle and what you hear is nothing. Henry V had given one order that most accounts of Agincourt skip entirely. He ordered silence. A total ban on noise in the English camp. No talking above a whisper. Any man-at-arms who violated it would have his horse confiscated. Any common soldier who violated it would have his right ear cut off. The silence served a military purpose. Henry did not want the French to know his numbers, his position, or how exhausted his men truly were. But it also meant that the English army passed the night before the most desperate battle of their lives in near total quiet, alone with their thoughts, in the dark and the mud. Men sharpened arrowheads. Men drove spare arrows into the ground in front of their positions for quick access during the fight. Men quietly checked their bowstrings for moisture damage from the rain, replacing any string that had absorbed too much water. These men were not knights. They were not aristocrats. They were yeoman farmers and tradesmen from Wales and the English shires who had been training with the longbow since childhood. English law for generations had required men to practice at the archery range every Sunday after church. The bow was woven into English peasant life the way the sword was woven into aristocratic life. These men had also been marching for 17 days with dysentery. Some historians believe a significant number of English archers fought at Agincourt without their lower garments, because dysentery had made wearing them impossible. They went into the most consequential battle of the century, half-dressed, hungry, and sick. Henry moved among them during the night without ceremony. No speeches, no theater. Just a king walking through his army in the dark, saying whatever it is you say to men who may not survive the morning. Stop and think about this field for a moment. Agincourt was fought in a gap between two woods. On the left, the wood of Tramcourt. On the right, the wood of Agincourt itself. The gap between them at the English end was roughly 1,000 yards wide. At the French end it was wider, but the field narrowed as you moved from the French position toward the English one, like a funnel. Any force advancing toward the English would be squeezed tighter with every step. The field had been plowed recently for winter wheat. Plowed fields in northern France in October, after 2 days of heavy rain, do not behave like solid ground. The furrows fill with water. The soil between them becomes a sticky, clinging paste that grabs whatever presses into it and resists being pulled free. For an unarmored man on foot, crossing 300 yards of this ground was serious physical labor. For a man in 40 kilograms of plate and chainmail, already exhausted from a long march, it was something close to a death sentence. Henry had read this terrain and placed his army accordingly. His archers were positioned at the edges of the English line, angled slightly inward, so that their arrows would converge on the center of any French advance. In front of each group of archers, he ordered sharpened wooden stakes to be driven into the ground at an angle, pointed outward toward the enemy. Not tall enough to stop a cavalry charge on their own, tall enough to channel it, to force horses away from the archers and toward the center of the field, where the English men-at-arms were waiting. The French formation was more complicated and more problematic. Their cavalry was positioned at the front and flanks. Their dismounted armored soldiers, the core of their fighting strength, were massed behind the cavalry. Their crossbowmen and infantry, who might have done real damage to the English archers at range, were at the back, unable to fire without hitting their own men. The French had more men than they could use. The gap between the woods was too narrow to deploy their full force at once. The mud made coordination between units almost impossible. They had prepared for a battle of numbers. They were about to fight a battle of terrain. For 3 hours, nobody moved. The English and French armies stood and stared at each other across 300 yards of mud. The French waited for the English to come to them. The English waited for the French to attack. Neither side wanted to cross that ground under arrow fire. Henry had a problem. His army was burning energy it did not have. His men were already weakened. Every hour they stood in cold October mud, they were losing strength. If he waited long enough, some of his archers might literally be too exhausted to draw their bows by the time the fighting began. Henry moved first. He gave the order to advance. The entire English line, archers and men-at-arms together, walked forward through the mud toward the French army, closing the distance to roughly 250 yards. The effective range of the English longbow. The archers stopped. They planted their stakes in the new position. They knocked their arrows. And Henry V gave the order that started the slaughter. Now strike. Before we talk about what happened when those arrows flew, you need to understand what a longbow actually is, because the weapons that won Agincourt are unlike anything in a modern sporting context. The English longbow was made of yew, specifically a combination of the heartwood and sapwood of the yew tree, which have different elastic properties that work together like a spring. It was roughly 6 feet tall, slightly taller than the man drawing it. The draw weight, the force required to pull the string back to the ear, was between 150 and 180 pounds for a military war bow. Hold that number for a moment. A modern Olympic recurve bow has a draw weight of around 50 pounds. The bows that won Agincourt required 3 times that force, and the men drawing them did it 10 to 12 times per minute for the full duration of a battle. We know what this did to human bodies because we have the skeletons of medieval English archers. They are deformed. The left arm, the bow arm, is thickened and enlarged. The spine is curved. The left wrist, shoulder, and elbow show repeated stress fractures that healed and re-injured over years of training from the age of 7 or 8. These men's bodies were permanently reshaped by their weapon before they ever set foot on a battlefield. At 250 yards, an armor-piercing arrow tip could not punch through full plate armor at every point of impact. But here is what it could do reliably at that range. It could kill the horses. And as the French moved closer through the mud, the arrows could find the gaps, the visor slots, the armpits, the back of the knee, the throat if a visor was lifted. Now multiply one man releasing 10 arrows per minute by 5,000 archers. In the first 60 seconds after Henry gave the order, 50,000 arrows were in the air. Not 50,000 over the course of the battle, 50,000 in the first minute. Multiple chronicles, both French and English, tell us the sky went dark. The sound they describe is like wind before a storm, and then it is not like wind. It is the sound of 50,000 steel tips striking wood, leather, steel, flesh, and the wet soil of France, all at once. The French cavalry charged. When the first French cavalry units spurred their horses forward, they were riding into what every instinct told them was a straightforward charge. 300 yards of open ground, a line of infantry and archers at the end. In every battle these men had trained for and fought in, this was the moment of French dominance. Heavy cavalry at the charge, lances down, shattered infantry formations like a hammer through glass. The mud changed the calculation before the first arrow struck. The horses, carrying armored riders into a plowed and saturated field, slowed almost immediately. The furrows caught their hooves. The wet soil gave way and did not give it back. A charge that should have covered 300 yards in seconds became something labored and slow, and all the while the arrows kept coming. Horses are not covered in plate steel. The arrows found their necks, their flanks, their legs. Wounded horses do not stop. They panic. Horses screaming from arrow wounds, stumbling in the mud, throwing their riders, bolting sideways into the men beside them. This became a wave of chaos that crashed back into the French infantry trying to advance behind them. Here is the detail that almost no account of Agincourt gives enough weight to. Under normal conditions, a trained knight could rise from the ground unaided in his armor. These men had trained for it. The armor was designed to be functional, not crippling. But this was not normal ground. This was ankle-deep plowed mud in October after 2 days of rain. When a man in 40 kilograms of steel was thrown from a horse and drove face first into that field, the mud sealed around him. The weight pinned him. There was no solid ground to push against. Some men could not rise. Contemporary sources describe French men-at-arms found suffocated in the mud of Agincourt, not killed by arrows, not killed by swords, drowned in a farmer's field, held down by the weight of the armor that was supposed to save their lives. Zoom in on one man, a French knight from the Picardy region, a man-at-arms whose name no chronicle preserved. He has been walking for 10 minutes through this field. He started the advance with 200 yards to cover. He has covered perhaps 100. The arrows have not stopped since Henry gave the order. His visor is down. Inside the helmet in October cold, he is sweating. He cannot see clearly through the visor slots. He cannot breathe easily. He can hear arrows striking the men around him. He can hear men falling. He cannot see them fall because his field of vision has been reduced to a narrow strip of mud and legs and chaos, and the mud is eating him from the ankle up. This is what the finest military machine in Europe had come to. The English men-at-arms advanced to meet what remained of the French assault. What followed was not single combat between armored knights. The French men-at-arms who reached the English line were already spent. Many could barely raise their weapons. They arrived compressed into a mass so tight that men at the edges were being shoved sideways by the weight of men behind them who could not see what was in front. The English archers, once the French were too close for bow fire, dropped their weapons and entered the hand-to-hand fighting. They carried what they had: mallets for driving stakes, short swords, axes, knives. Some had grabbed weapons from fallen Frenchmen. They could move. In a field full of men slowly sinking into mud under 40 kilograms of armor, the ability to move was worth more than any amount of steel. Henry's chaplain, who was physically present at the battle, and whose account is one of the closest eyewitness records we have, tells us that the dead piled up so fast that later French arrivals were climbing over the bodies of earlier casualties to reach the English line. Men fought on top of dead men. The mud mixed with blood. The field that had smelled of rain and wet earth at dawn smelled now of iron. Within 1 hour, possibly less, the main French assault had collapsed. This is the moment this video has been building toward, and it is not the part most people expect. By early afternoon, the English had won. The main French assault was broken and scattered. Thousands of French soldiers had been taken prisoner, captured by English soldiers who understood that a live French nobleman was worth a fortune in ransom. The English line was ringed with prisoners. Disarmed men, sitting or kneeling in the mud, waiting to be escorted to the rear. Then a report reached Henry. A large body of French troops, possibly the rear guard, possibly a regrouped force from the earlier assault, was visible on the French flank. There was also a disturbance at the English baggage train, where local fighters had attacked and looted supplies that Henry could not afford to lose. Henry made a calculation. If the French rear guard attacked now with thousands of French prisoners inside the English lines, those prisoners might rearm themselves. They outnumbered their guards. A prisoner who reached the weapons stacked around him was no longer a prisoner. He was a combatant, and Henry's exhausted army could not fight on two fronts with thousands of hostile men in their midst. Henry V gave the order to kill the prisoners. This was not the heat of battle. The fighting was over. This was a deliberate command given after the outcome was decided to execute men who had already surrendered and been accepted as captives. Most of the English men-at-arms refused. They would be killing men worth fortunes in ransom. Men who had already given up their weapons, men whose lives had value. The rules of warfare in this period were explicit about this. You did not kill a prisoner who had surrendered. Henry's own knights balked. He sent 200 archers from his personal guard to carry out the order instead. What followed is the part of Agincourt that Shakespeare did not put in his play. Disarmed French prisoners, men who had given up their weapons, men whose surrender had been formally accepted, were killed where they sat in the mud, stabbed through the visor, throats cut. Some burned when their captors set fire to equipment around them. A Burgundian chronicler named Monstrelet recorded it. His countrymen had fought at Agincourt on the French side. He had every reason to be believed. A second Burgundian writer, a chronicler named Wavrin, confirmed it. Even the account written by Henry's own chaplain, the man who accompanied the English army and was physically present, records the killing of prisoners. He tries to justify it, he does not deny it. The French rearguard, as it turned out, did not attack. The threat Henry had used to justify the order dissolved before the order was fully carried out. The prisoners who survived the killing survived because Henry rescinded the command once it became clear the threat had passed. The medieval world had rules about this. Both sides understood them. What Henry ordered at Agincourt violated them. Contemporaries knew it. Henry knew it. This is the truth the title of this video promised. Not that the English won. Not that 6,000 men defeated an army 3 times their size. That at the moment of his greatest victory, the king who Shakespeare turned into the noblest of heroes ordered the killing of men who had already surrendered, and history spent 6 centuries building a legend around a man it preferred not to look at too closely. The dead, French casualties from all 3 phases, the cavalry charge, the infantry assault, and the prisoner killing, totaled somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 men. Among them, 3 dukes, 5 counts, 90 lords, and 1,500 knights. The English dead, killed in actual combat, are estimated at between 100 and 500 men. Henry V had won one of the most lopsided victories in medieval military history. Now let me tell you what the legend got wrong. Shakespeare's play about Henry V was written in 1599, 184 years after the battle. The St. Crispin's Day speech, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers," is one of the most quoted passages in the English language. It was never said at Agincourt. Henry's silence order would have made such a speech impossible. The chronicles written by men who were present at the battle record no speech, no rallying cry, no brotherhood proclamation. The band of brothers was not a band. It was 6,000 men, most of them sick, many half-dressed from dysentery, standing in a plowed field that smelled of illness, waiting to fight an army that outnumbered them 2 or 3 to 1. The victory at Agincourt was not won by speeches. It was won by 5,000 archers who had been training since childhood to draw 180 pounds of force 10 times a minute by a field that a French farmer had plowed 3 weeks earlier and by 2 days of rain that nobody planned. The men who won Agincourt were not the knights, they were not the aristocrats, they were the archers, mostly Welsh and English commoners whose names appear in no chronicle, who trained at the archery range after church on Sundays because English law required it. They saved England and then went home to their farms. The skeletons of medieval English archers found at other sites are deformed. The bow arm is thickened. The spine is twisted. These men paid for the victory at Agincourt with their bodies before the battle even started, over years of training from the age of 7 or 8. Henry V went on to sign the Treaty of Troyes in 1420 that recognized him as heir to the French throne. He died 2 years later, of dysentery, aged 35, never having sat on the throne he had won. His son, Henry VI, inherited the claim at 9 months old and lost all of France by the time he was 30. The victory that cost France 6,000 of its finest knights bought England 20 years of contested claim to a throne that evaporated before any English king could properly hold it. The mud at Agincourt dried, the field was replowed, the winter wheat came up. Crops still grow there now. Ground-penetrating radar surveys near the village have found traces of the mass graves where the French dead were buried. Not many, because bone dissolves in acidic northern French soil over 6 centuries, but enough to confirm what the chronicles recorded. Thousands of men, same location, same period. The battlefield is farmland. You can walk it today. You cannot see the furrows that killed a generation of French nobility. You cannot smell the mud. You cannot hear the sound that 50,000 arrows made in the first 60 seconds after the English king gave his order. But now you know what happened there, and now you know what happened after. If this changed how you see the medieval world, subscribe. There are more stories like this one.